They said distance would help. 1,000 miles. That was the number everyone kept repeating like it was a spell. Like it could be spoken enough times to become true. 1,000 miles from the lake. 1,000 miles from the cabins. 1,000 miles from the sound of wet leaves under boots that weren't mine. I repeated it too at first. In therapy sessions, in the mirror, in texts to people who didn't know what to say anymore. 1,000 miles away. Safe now. But distance doesn't erase habits, and it doesn't erase senses. I chose this place because it was cheap, because it was quiet, because it wasn't near anything anyone would call a destination. A rental house at the edge of a town that barely even qualified as one. 2 bedrooms, a small porch, trees thick enough behind it that the wind carried a smell I told myself was just pine and soil. Sometimes it wasn't. I noticed the little things first. I always do. I always did. The front door, for instance. I bolt it every night. I check it every night. Once wasn't enough anymore after that summer. I pulled it closed, slide the bolt, test the handle. Then I do it again before bed. Sometimes again when I wake up sweating at 2 a.m, convinced that I've heard breathing where no one should be. Twice now I've come down in the morning to find it unlocked. Not wide open, not swinging, just not bolted. The rational explanations line up easily enough. Muscle memory failing, dissociation, PTSD, as everyone says, delivered gently and confidently as if naming it solves it. I nod and I agree. I want to believe them because believing them is easier than imagining the alternatives. Still, I started marking things. A piece of tape folded into a tiny triangle and placed at the top of the door frame. Invisible unless you know to look. If the door opens, the tape falls. It fell yesterday. I didn't tell anyone that part. The smell comes and goes. It's faint enough that I question myself every time. That's the worst part. If it were strong, I could name it, react to it, do something. But it's never quite enough to justify panic. It drifts in like a memory I didn't ask for. Woodsy and damp. Underneath it, metallic. Old pennies, rust. Something that doesn't belong in a place where nothing has been hurt. My therapist says scent is powerful, that the brain stores it differently, closer to emotion than logic. She says trauma can resurrect smells long after the source is gone. She asks me to describe it, and I do, carefully leaving out the part where it makes my hands shake. Grounding techniques, she suggests. So when the smell comes, I ground myself. I name objects. Table, couch, lamp, window. I tell myself where I am. I open the windows wider, even when it's cold out, even when the trees whisper against each other like they're sharing something. The smell never gets stronger. It never fades completely either. Last night, it followed me into my bedroom. I checked the closet twice, then 3 times. Nothing inside but clothes and boxes I still haven't unpacked. I shut the door, leaned my weight against it, and stood there listening to my own breathing until it slowed. When I turned around, the window was open wider than I remembered leaving it. I've been trying to be normal. That's the word people like to use, normal, as if it's something you can return to, like a misplaced item. I go to work, I smile when appropriate, I accept invitations even when every instinct tells me to stay home and listen for footsteps that aren't there. That's how I met Mark, through work. He's the kind of person who fills silence without realizing it, who jokes when tension creeps in, who thinks laughter is a universal solvent. He knows what happened, in broad strokes. Everyone does. Final girl survivor stories travel fast, even when no one uses that phrase out loud. When I told him I was still unpacking weeks after moving in, he offered to help. Distraction, he said. Doctor approved. I didn't correct him. He came over that afternoon with coffee and an energy that felt too loud for my small living room. The house seemed to shrink around him like it didn't know what to do with a voice that confident. We worked through boxes together, kitchen stuff first, then books. He kept handing me items and asking questions about them, about me, about that summer. I deflected when I could. When I couldn't, he softened his voice and nodded in the right places. "You're safe now," he said at one point, like he was reminding himself, too. I smiled. I even believed it for a moment. Then he went out to his car and came back with a thrift store bag swinging from his hand. "Look what I found," Mark said. He was grinning. The kind of grin people get when they think they're about to be clever. He reached into the bag and pulled it out, holding it up like a trophy. The mask. Time did something strange to it in my hands, but not enough. The shape was the same. The cheap plastic warped slightly along the jaw, the surface scuffed and dulled. One strap was missing, the other stretched thin. I didn't move. "I thought it'd be funny," he went on, already misreading my silence. "You know, for a horror movie night. Thrift store gold, right?" He laughed. The sound scraped against my nerves. I felt my heart beat in my throat. The room tilted just enough to make me grip the counter behind me. My vision tunneled, locking onto the eye holes. Too dark, too deep, like they led somewhere else. "That's not funny," I said finally, and my voice sounded distant, like it had to travel a long way to reach my mouth. Mark blinked. "Hey, sorry, I didn't..." He stopped talking because he was already lifting it. "Just messing around," he said. And before I could tell him not to, before I could explain that this wasn't a mask, this was the mask, he pulled it over his face. The smile disappeared behind plastic. The room went quiet. For half a second, just half, I wasn't in my living room anymore. I was back there, summer heat pressing down, trees too close, the sound of someone breathing where no one should be, right behind me. Mark tilted his head, mimicking something he'd seen in a movie, and that was when I screamed. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough. He tore the mask off immediately, color draining from his face. "I'm so sorry," he said over and over. I swear I didn't think. I nodded and I told him it was okay. It wasn't. He left soon after, apologizing again at the door. I watched him drive away through the window until his car disappeared down the road. The mask was still on my table. I hadn't seen him set it down. There are things that I know for certain. I know I did not bring that mask into this house. I know I did not ask Mark to leave it. I know that when I picked it up, it felt warmer than it should have. I told myself it was residual heat from his hands. I told myself not to read anything into it. Then I washed my hands anyway, scrubbing until my skin burned. I put the mask back into the thrift store bag and tied it shut. I meant to throw it away, I really did. But when I opened the front door, the smell hit me again, stronger this time, copper threading through damp leaves. The trees behind the house were moving even though there was no wind. I shut the door and locked it, bolted it, checked the tape. The bag went into the hall closet, top shelf, buried behind coats. I sat on the couch and just breathed until my vision cleared. That night, I dreamt of unpacking boxes that never emptied, each one full of the same thing. Plastic, scratches, hollow eyes. When I woke up, the closet door was open. The bag was gone. I didn't call the police. I considered it. I even picked up my phone and opened the keypad. But what would I say? Someone took a mask from my closet? Someone who left no sign of entry, no disturbance beyond the absence itself? They'd say it was just stress, trauma, sleepwalking even. And they'd be right. That's the worst part. They could be right, and it wouldn't mean I was wrong. I searched my house instead. Every room, every drawer, under the beds, behind the washer. I checked the attic ladder even though I hadn't unpacked it yet. Even though the thought of climbing up there made my stomach twist. Nothing. But the smell was back, clinging to the hallway like it had weight. I stood very still and listened. At first, there was nothing but the house settling. Pipes trickling, wood complaining softly. Then, faint, almost imagined, the sound of something shifting where it shouldn't. Not footsteps, fabric. I locked myself in the bedroom that night and dragged the dresser in front of the door. I slept in short bursts, waking at every creak, every whisper of movement outside. At 3:17 a.m., I heard breathing. Slow, controlled, and patient. I did not open the door. Mark texted the next morning. Hey, I've been thinking about yesterday, and I feel awful. I didn't reply. Another message came an hour later. I swear I didn't leave that mask there to mess with you. My hands went cold. What do you mean? I typed, then erased it. Typed again. You didn't leave it? The response came almost immediately. No, I brought it as a joke, yeah, but when I saw how upset you were, I put it back in the bag and took it with me. I remember because I didn't want it in your house. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. I saw it on the table after you left, I typed. There was a pause this time. That's not possible. The smell drifted through the room again, thick enough now that my eyes watered. Mark, I wrote, are you sure you didn't forget it? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. I'm sure, he said, because when I got home, the bag was empty. I shouldn't have gone outside. I knew that. Every survival instinct screamed it. But knowing something and obeying it are two different skills, and I've never been good at the second one. The smell led me to the back of the property, to the line where the mowed grass gave up and the forest began. The air was cooler there, heavier. Sound behaved differently under the trees, swallowed and redirected until distance meant nothing. I stood at the edge and called Mark's name once, just to hear a human voice in the space. Something answered, but not with words. Not exactly. Just a shift, deeper in, like something acknowledging it had been noticed. I didn't step forward. That's when I saw it. The bag laying at the base of a tree, half open. The mask visible inside. The strap hung loose, brushing against leaves like a finger trailing along skin. I took a step back. I heard the leaves behind me crunch. I ran. I stayed. That part surprises people when they hear about it later, if they hear it at all. They expect flight, another move, another 1,000 miles. But running only teaches things how fast you are, and I was tired of giving lessons. The police finished their work quickly. They always do when there's nothing they can catalog. They walked the tree line, took photos of disturbed leaves, and asked me to describe the mask again. One of them tried to make a joke about horror movies and stopped halfway through when he saw my face. They returned the bag, empty. I watched them place it gently on the kitchen table like it might bruise if handled too roughly. When they left, the house felt larger, stretched thin around the absence of voices. I locked the door after them, bolted it, checked the tape. It held. For 3 days, nothing happened. No smell, no sounds at night, no dreams of water and rising shapes. I slept longer than I had in months, the kind of deep, blank sleep people talk about with reverence. On the 4th night, the wind came back. Not loudly, not urgently, just enough to stir the trees behind the house, to remind me they were still there. The smell followed shortly after, faint but unmistakable, drifting through rooms I hadn't entered yet that evening. I didn't panic. That surprised me too. I stood in the hallway and waited, listening, letting my body decide what to do before my thoughts caught up. Somewhere in the house, something shifted. Not footsteps or breath. Plastic. Settling. I found the mask on the porch the next morning. It was placed carefully on the small table beside the door, facing inward as if it had been brought home and left where it could be found without effort. The surface was cleaner than I remembered. The straps lay neatly coiled beside it. I stood there for a long time, keys in my hand, considering my options. Throwing it away hadn't worked. Burying it only changed where it surfaced. Burning it, I suspected, would teach it something I didn't want it to learn. So I picked it up. It was cool this time. Neutral. As ordinary as it was ever going to be. I carried it inside and set it on the shelf in the hallway, the one that had been empty because I hadn't known what to put there. The mask fit perfectly, like the space had been waiting for it. The smell receded. That night, the door stayed locked. Not because I checked it more often or because I added new markers or routines. It stayed locked because it wanted to be seen, not invited. I understand that now. The mask doesn't hunt. It doesn't stalk. It doesn't even kill, not directly. It arrives. It waits. It lets people choose how close they want to stand to it, how long they want to pretend it's harmless. It remembers the shapes of things. Camps, houses, victims, survivors, me. Mark doesn't visit anymore. He still texts sometimes, careful and distant, like someone speaking to a place they once lived. I don't correct his assumptions. I let him believe what he needs to. My therapist says stability is about control, about reclaiming space. She wouldn't like my solution. The house is quiet most nights now. The wind moves through the trees, carrying familiar smells, familiar patience. The mask stays where I put it. I don't hide it. I don't explain it. When someone new comes over, a repairman, a neighbor, anyone who laughs too easily, their eyes always drift to the shelf, and then hesitantly to me. They always pause before they ask. I tell them it's something I kept. I don't tell them why. Some stories don't end. They just get unpacked carefully, piece by piece, until everything has a place and nothing feels out of order anymore. The door's bolted tonight. The tape is still there. And the house knows who, no, what answers my door now.